Welcome to the Land Your Bet Sports Betting Podcast, coming to you here on a Sunday night after a full slate of NFL, as well as Jrue Holiday on the move officially from Portland to Boston. So to kick things off, I got Nate Weitzer here, co-host of the All the Things Coast to Coast over on thelines.com. We're talking about football and soon to be basketball, as we are probably most well known for that NBA Coast to Coast. So let's kick it off with NBA stuff, Nate. And before I even talk about any kind of win total changes, any kind of changes in odds, you are a Boston Celtics fan. What's your initial reaction? You're a cerebral Boston Celtics fan, and oftentimes, I think, well-regulated, not overly pessimistic or optimistic. So I'm trying to get your opinion there as a C's fan and the type that you are.
Thank you. Well, when you had me on Thursday to talk about Dame go to Milwaukee, and my knee-jerk reaction was like, Boston or the Bucks are winning the title. And I guess I was kind of prescient, thinking that this type of trade would happen, and now they have dead even odds to win the title, win the East, and clearly just seem like stacked teams that have a little bit of questions with their depth. I think Boston now left a little bit strained. I mean, also losing Grant Williams, big thing. But really, I've also always thought about how, like, Marcus Smart, what if you could just flip him? You know, we joked, like, what if you could put Isaiah Thomas and Marcus Smart together so that they each play one side of the floor? And that's essentially what you get in Jrue Holiday, is just an absolutely elite defender who's not, he's not an incredible offensive player, but he can be efficient. And really what you get is an immediate answer to Milwaukee as the best individual defender to throw at Damian Lillard. And look at his last 10 against Jrue. Dame has been really rough in the efficiency department, 40%, 27% from deep. He's at minus 106. He has some high turnover games in here. Head-to-head against Jrue, he's on the record saying Jrue Holiday is the best perimeter defender in the league, along with lots of other stars, so he knows he will give him trouble. And you also have Derek White that the C's were able to hold on to there. Futures in the NBA, always health dependent, always really got to think down the line about what's going to happen. But are you going to tell me Kristaps Porzingis is more injury prone than Rob Williams? If that's the guy you need to hold up, like, I think he's a little bit more reliable. And I just think the C's now, with better coaches around Joe Mazzulla and more options for him, because they can play 5 out, because they have a more, fundamental offensigoing player in Jrue Holiday. They are the team to beat. They are better than the Bucks on paper. And so that's where I stand, but it's going to be a long season.
Amazing. Let me, I'm not even going to respond to any things you said. I think you said a lot of stuff that I agree with. I'll just get into a few things for Boston. I think I want to talk about Miami a little bit at the end, and obviously want to talk about Milwaukee, as now these two teams are inextricably tied together. Dame and Jrue somewhat tied together, mostly probably because Jrue has what we can consider a crater-sized chip on his shoulder, I would imagine at this point. I don't even think you can call it a chip if his entire shoulder is blown off, because he's so ready to just go out and really prove, not necessarily anybody wrong, but prove that he's not, his value is greater than that of a trade piece, even for a generational offensive talent like Damian Lillard. So looking at Boston's roster now, I know we went through the other teams involved in the Damian Lillard trade. We went through their rosters on the last one, but just looking at Boston real quick and how this rotation might look, I think you got to have Derek White in there at this point. I think we've established that he's probably, if he's not going to be a starter, he's got to be the first guy off the bench. So he's like heavy minutes guy, but I think he's the odd man out in terms of rotation. So at point guard, you're going to put Jrue there at this point. You've got Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, and Al Horford. A couple of things I want to bring up, and I want to look at these two teams through the lens of how this goes really well for the Celtics and for the Bucks, and how it could go wrong. For the Celtics, really good. Cannot think of a better player for them to pick up. As you just said, everything about Marcus Smart injecting offense into his game, well, that's Jrue Holiday. You've now got a similar defender, actually a bit bigger defender in Jrue Holiday, who can probably guard a few more positions, although Marcus was really good at times bothering big guys. I would also say if Kristaps is healthy, that's really it. Like, everything else I would say off of this point is just, is he healthy? Because if he gives you 60 games and is ready at the end of the season to play in the playoffs, I think that that's worth it. And now you've made a trade that makes you better in the situations that you needed to get better. You worry maybe, and we'll look at could be bad. You worry maybe about a lack of defense down low if Kristaps is not healthy. And even if he is, the backup coming in at this point, you lost Grant Williams and you lost Rob Will. But Rob Will played 35 games last season, and this team was still sixth in terms of limiting centers on the other team scoring. Rebounds about middle of the pack. So they can still group rebound as well as anybody with the two wings that they have. The way that it does go bad is they can't guard centers in the playoffs is really what I see it turning into is does a tandem like Allen or Mobley, if something happens with the 76ers, that's good. Does Embiid give you trouble at that point? Giannis and Brolo, though, that's how who you're looking at in the playoffs that you have to stop. And obviously, once you get to the West, some form of probably Jokic or AD, guys like Sabonis would give them trouble. Does that worry you at plus 165 to win the East? If you do think they're better than the Bucks, is that worth it? What do you think of that analysis there?
No, I mean the roster is not finalized. Like there will be buyout candidates. Like Daniel Tice will probably wind up back on the Celtics or some other scrappy big man. Like it's not that hard to find a center, to find bodies to throw at Joel Embiid, who apparently just stops himself in the playoffs when the Sixers implode and start infighting. But yeah, I mean, I think there's still plenty of depth to be found here. I think the fact that you have Brad Stevens steering the ship now just really has to encourage you that as a former coach, just knowing exactly what button to push if you can, as knowing like F them picks, like I'm trying to win right now and going to get Derek White with picks or whatever. It's just like it's a breath of fresh air I think for a fan base and probably for a team to be able to build that way, where you're not just like thinking down the line. He's just like, no, who can I get on this team right now that will help us win a championship?
Yeah, as opposed to fantasy basketball owner Danny Ainge when he was the manager of the team, who just sort of treated his team as though like he was always going to just get the next best piece to put alongside those two guys, as opposed to just constructing a roster that made sense that could play together for maybe more than 1 or 2 seasons at a time, like you were saying. So yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that this makes them the favorite because, and I'll move on to Milwaukee to talk about that, and I'll just start with what could be bad for them because I think it's easy to talk about what could be good. We're going to watch probably what I would predict to be one of the best, at least for 1 or maybe 2 seasons, we're going to watch the best pick and roll duo that we might have ever seen in terms of a roller and Giannis and a point guard and Dame. And I heard a really good point that Giannis doesn't like to be the roller. He feels like it's beneath him as someone who's so highly paid. But Dame is going to earn his respect as someone that he will roll off of. He's like, sure, there's a few guys I would just go ahead and acquiesce to whatever it is that they want to do off of the pick and roll. What could be bad though is wing and perimeter defense. Pat Connaughton is what the best remaining wing defender in my opinion at this point. I suppose Andre Jackson Jr., the Rook, will give us something there, but that once again could be bad because if Andre Jackson Jr. is playing legit minutes on that second unit, that depth, as you briefly mentioned at the beginning, is what I worry about more than anything with them. Maybe not as much. Like there's defensive depth. Jay Crowder, good defender. As Beauchamp, maybe good defender. At least a good 3-and-D guy that he should be. And Andre Jackson is a plus defender already, probably. But I don't know what that scoring is going to look like. They don't have a backup point guard after Dame, and you worry that if Dame and Giannis and Brolo, even Middleton, are playing less than 70 games, that you're going to be struggling to win some of those games that maybe you were able to win with more depth that they had last season.
And you have a completely new coach who I frankly don't know that much about, but we're gonna have to see how he handles these pieces. I'm not a fan of Budenholzer, so I think it's probably an upgrade, and will be to be determined. But yeah, I mean, my stance on the Bucks for now is not going to the window for them to win anything in the playoffs here, because I got to see how Chris Middleton looks. I got to see how Brook Lopez still looks at 36, I believe, because I think he's going to be asked to do a lot defensively now that this is their roster construction.
Right.
But what I am going to do is be looking at some overs early when they play. I think they're just going to be a great offensive team. Those guys, even just being individually, the scorer, the 37-point scorers that they could be. And with the Celtics now, I might be looking at some unders. I don't know. I'll be looking at them. I think their win total is going to reset here. It was 54.5.
Yeah.
But I think definitely have the potential to be a 60-win team here in the regular season. So
You
we'll
can
see.
bet that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 60 plus wins on FanDuel for the Bucks and the Celtics is both plus 200.
It,
Not that much juice for a really, really good season. My thing with these two teams is going to be how hard are they trying in the regular season? I understand the Bucks won 58 games last season. Giannis actually missed. He only played 60 something games last season. I think it was like maybe 68, 67 games last season. And Middleton obviously didn't even play for the first 2.5 months. Still had a huge strict minutes and game restriction when he came back. Jrue's the only guy playing, above 75 games for this team. So with the regular season, I'm a little bit more concerned that they're trying to rest guys to just have Dame for the playoffs. I similarly feel that the Celtics might have. I'm kind of getting ahead of what I think is going to be their first not try hard season, sort of where you enter that veteran status, will win 52 games, 50 games, 51 games in the regular season and be perfectly fine with a top 3 seed if we're healthy going into the playoffs rather than fight for a 1 seed and risk injury going into the playoffs. So I might be looking to fade them a bit more in the regular season. I actually did hit the Bucks under 55.5 wins as soon as it came out because I thought it might go down a smidge. I know that sounds crazy in theory, but I do see the ways that this could go wrong more than right. And not even wrong, but just like I said, not necessarily what I would call a regular season try hard team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. I wouldn't have the gumption to go under on that. I just don't know what it's going to look like. We haven't seen Damian Lillard on a winning team, on a winning roster in like 5-6 years, and we forget like I don't know if we really do know what it's going to look like. On Portland, it was the wheeling, dealing, fun time. But when you just replace Jrue Holiday with him, I think there is something to be said with the Bucks just being this defensive juggernaut that just steamrolled the Indiana Pacers and anyone else that was a mediocre team in the East, and they'd be minus 17 every night because you knew they were just going to steamroll them. I mean, maybe that's not the case anymore. Maybe they are more a bullseye team, getting people's best efforts, getting into shootouts. That's just going to be fun to watch. So I liking some overs, but yeah, it might not lead to as many wins.
Yeah, that's fair. I think one way that I will not necessarily that I'll use these transactions is to fade Miami. Miami, I did take at under 49.5 wins when it opened because I was like, well, until we know what's up with Dame, this whole thing is at a standstill. So I don't know why I would feel so confident that Dame is for sure going to end up on that team. Then it went down to 48.5. And as soon as this trade happened, it went down to 46.5 because part of that 48, 49.5 was, well, they might and probably will get Dame. And if they don't, then they'll get somebody that they'll make a move off of that. And then Jrue Holiday ends up on one of the worst situations for Miami, which is in Boston. So, I mean, when it comes to like really good, here's what I have. Maybe they'll get really lucky again. Maybe Jaime Jaquez is really, really, really good. Maybe Haywood Highsmith is really, really, really good and takes a huge leap. Maybe Tyler Hero plays completely out of his mind with his massive, crater-sized chip as well, and is able to use that fuel to average 24 and 7 assists a game. More likely, they lost Drew Vincent. They didn't replace that three-point shooting with Josh Richardson now able to get more minutes. Kevin Love is currently listed as their starting power forward, which maybe you put Caleb Martin at power forward instead, which does that make you feel any better? Right. You see where I'm going. Like, I feel like they're a team who had some outs and then the turn was the worst possible card that they could possibly flipped over, which was now Jrue on the Bucks.
That's don't expect the expected from Miami Heat though. Don't try to fade them because this happened. Now maybe you actually get Jimmy Butler trying for an entire regular season because he's pissed that nobody came and joined him. Last year they just completely fell off on the 1 seed to like, are they even interested in the playoffs? Like it just was a complete mental like breakdown all season. So I would think maybe go the other way. Like, oh, they lost their undrafted free agents who they turned into like to $40 million players that other teams are going to pay. Like they'll unearth other guys. Like they'll be fine around the edges, and they will be. I think a 4 or 5 seed in the East.
Heed those words of caution from Nate, who I is recalling last season when we were all so quick to just write them off. Rightly so. They didn't even win their first play-in tournament game, and then made it all the way to the finals where they clearly had no shot. But they're not going to catch anybody by surprise like that. I think the regular season is where I'm still concerned. But like you said, just zagging when the zig is, oh well, now the Heat are just screwed. Maybe, but we'll see. To your point, so I don't know that I have anything else for that part of it all. I think at the end of the day, I will add a couple more things that are in a different podcast that's up, which is I did tail my guy Kareem, who was on the pod, talking about a few like long shot bets that were just worth it in case they hit with like very small plays of like $10 on, well, I say $10, but like zero point 0.1 units for however much you're betting. Kareem's not really betting $10 on anything anymore, but it was basically the Knicks to win at like 16 or 20 to 1, depending on where you found it. Win the East, come get the 1 seed there, and then not come out of the East, but take the 1 seed, and the 1 seed for the Cavs as well at 20 to 1. They're a team that I do think is a little bit sneakier at this point, that keeps continuing to fly under the radar, that will be a regular season try hard team for sure. And one that, look, maybe the division is something that they can pull out. I do think they're well equipped to match up with the front court of the Bucks at this point, depending on if Mobley can take another leap, which I think he can. So we'll see how that goes. But I mean, any last words on the Cavs or anything like that before we wrap?
9-30 against teams above 500 or something like that. That was the Cleveland Cavs record last year in games that meant something. So.
Never short of conviction in his opinions. All right, Nate, sticking around for some NFL talk here as it's late night here on Sunday. We're both hoping that these Chiefs can pull out a bit more of a victory than they have at halftime while recording. It's an 8-point game. Just need another point there from the Chefs. Maybe a little safety. Who cares? Just need to win this next half by a little bit. So I want to just run through the league. Nate and I, for full transparency as well, we go through a couple things each week in the NFL. We have a pick'em league where we make 5 picks combined to try to go 5-0 each week, or at least get the most wins by the end of the season for a pretty nice payout. We also have our NFL Coast to Coast show where we pick player props each week as well. So we are already talking about these games beforehand, and it's actually nice for me to have a nice little sort of like decompression session about these games. I don't think we're going to have an opinion about each one of them, but let's start with the London game, Jacksonville, Atlanta. I just want to say that was a game that we did pick. I'll just start by saying I felt really comfortable about it. You tossed it out there originally, and I started feeling more comfortable about it as I looked deeper into these metrics where basically Jacksonville can move the ball on offense. Atlanta cannot move the ball on offense. And those are two things that I'm taking away as we go through each one and say buy, sell, if we're buying or selling any aspect of this. What I'm buying is, one, that the Jags can move the ball and the Falcons cannot. Two, that that's a huge part of what drives me to believe in betting on a team is, do I believe you can actually get freaking first downs more than once on a drive? Do I think you can put 2 or 3 or 4 of them together? And the teams that continue to put together the first downs are the teams that seem to overachieve compared to what the status of their roster would be. I think that's going to be Jacksonville in a lot of games, and that Houston matchup last weekend was just a really bad matchup for them.
Nah, I might sell both teams in this matchup, but sell harder on the Falcons because, I mean, what we're talking about is fading quarterbacks that don't gain the respect of the opposing secondary. So Desmond Ridder, you can just let your wide receivers in single coverage. You can swarm to the ball on Bijan. I mean, we've seen the Falcons' offense is one of the worst 5 probably in the league, and we've seen them just completely exposed in these last couple weeks. The Packers, that they're coming back to beat the Packers now is not looking very great because the Packers also got trucked by the Lions and are just not very good either on offense in the same type of situation. I did not come away completely convinced by the Jaguars' offense. I think it's still a weird tug of war with Press Taylor calling the plays here, and he probably shouldn't be. Maybe Doug Peterson should be, but it just doesn't quite seem right. I mean, how can they not keep Calvin Ridley involved after the debut he had? The running game not great, offensive line not great. Lawrence had to make a lot of plays under pressure, so I'm not high on the Jags, who now get the absolute juggernaut Bills in London next week.
Yeah, interestingly, they are the juggernaut Bills right now. Interestingly, the Jags are in a division that nobody wants to win. I'm not going to bet on the AFC South because nobody wants to win it. The Titans, who we were leaving for dead, won today as well, 27-3. And then the Colts also lost a game that they came back, but they still didn't win. And then in the other South, in the NFC South, you look at how the Bucks are now in the driver's seat. The Saints lose to the Bucks. The Falcons lose as well. The Panthers were never for real. They lost to the Vikings, despite the Vikings throwing up all over themselves and trying to lose that game. So there's a couple of things there. I just don't know that anybody in the AFC South I trust other than the Bucks, based predominantly on Baker is playing fine enough to beat mediocre teams until he shows me otherwise. And the Saints are the definition of mediocre. And then that defense is as good as some people thought it was, and better than I think a lot of people thought it was. With the defensive backfield still tops in the league, the linebacking core, despite being hurt today, was incredible as well, stopping the run. So even with Alvin Kamara back, anything else that you're buying or selling, I'm definitely like buying that the Bucs are better than we thought. I'm selling that the Saints are going to be capable of beating teams as good or better than them.
Yeah, I like your take. I think the Bucs are just like, the fastest guy in a group of slow guys,
Yeah.
like
there you go.
they're just like a fundamentally sound football team in a division where other teams are going to make a lot of mistakes, where the Saints are very well coached under Dennis Allen. Derek Carr probably just shouldn't have been playing. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to sell the Saints now that they get Kamara back, they get him a little more acclimated. I think they have the potential to be a very good offensive team at some point down the line here. I just think, for this particular week, they did not have much. And for the AFC South, still think it's the Jaguars. Yeah, I think, if you're on that note, though, I think one of the biggest shocks for me is the Titans looking good against the Bengals defense, because the Titans have the worst offensive line in football. And I mean, Vrabel does a great job scheming it up, but to be able to just, do whatever they wanted against the Bengals, to just be a step ahead, like, man, it looks over for Cincinnati.
It does. And that's what I told you on text earlier, was like, don't believe that this means the Titans are good. Believe that it means the Bengals are as bad as we thought they were. And the interesting team in the AFC South now is the Texans, who beat the Steelers. And quick takeaways there. I'm buying that the Steelers are garbage because Kenny Pickett's garbage. That's not fair. He just got really hurt today. So, like, thoughts and prayers for sure. Mitch Trubisky is going to come in, though, and take over that team. So I don't think it's going to make it much better. Don't love the Steelers because, once again, it's if you don't have a quarterback that can move the ball, that's what we're both saying here, then you don't buy it. The Texans, let's tread somewhat lightly because they have so many holes in key areas like the offensive line. But let's be very clear. C.J. Stroud is good at quarterback, and he's going to be good in the NFL. And he has two receivers that no one really thought of coming into the season, Nico Collins and Tank Dell. And I believe in both of those guys. So, with Robert Woods out there as the vet, Dalton Schultz is actually starting to put things together with him. Damian Pierce had his first game, which you called, over 50 yards. That's a team that, if they're still they were 6.5 to 1 before today to win the division. That's going to look a lot less, probably cut in half.
Strangely, their next 4 games are against the NFC South, the Titans, after their bye here. So just all in a row. And then they get the Bengals, who we just said are.
You're talking about the Texans,
and then they get the Cardinals. And they're home against the Broncos here, and they get Zach Wilson's Jets. So I mean, it is wheels up in terms of wins for Houston. I think down the stretch, they're definitely looking like they're going to smash that win total.
Yeah,
with CJ Stroud being better than almost every quarterback we listed there, at least Joe Burrow on one leg. I mean, it looks pretty promising there. Despite all their injuries on defense and on the offensive line, they're still looking really good.
AFC South, you can still get them at plus 475. Longest odds to win the AFC South are the Houston Texans. Nate just read you off the simplicity of their schedule, the ease of their schedule, combined with everybody else just doesn't want it. 1 week to the next, I think the Titans took advantage of a awful Cincinnati Bengals team right now with a Joe Burrow that is not Joe Burrow. So AFC East, Miami scores 70, then gives up 48 and scores 20. I mean, I saw some of that game. There was a really good defensive effort by the Bills. The Bills on offense are as good as any team in the league, despite what you might have thought coming in here, how good Miami is. The gap, if Miami's offense is better, it's not by much, and it might not be better at this point. So what I do with this is I'm not selling the Dolphins necessarily. I think they got out coached today, which is interesting because we were kind of all praising Mike McDaniel for a while. I think that I was saying before this game, we've gone too far the other way with the Bills, especially when people were betting on the Commanders for them. Was like we've gone too far away from this. That was the fluke here, was the Jets game, not everything that happened since then. And I think that for now, like they've still like reasserted that they are the best team in the AFC East.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if not the best team in the AFC, as it looks right now. But yeah, I mean, what's interesting with the Dolphins is Bill Belichick really put this blueprint out there in week 2. Sean McDermott copies it a little bit, but with better personnel, and they made Tua look bad for the first time all season. They took Tyreek Hill away. If you had the balls to say, I'm going under on Tyreek Hill's prop, that was a call to make, which I thought about for a second, but did not have the balls to put that on video. in player props. But yeah, they going with the 3 high safety at one point, just bracketing him. Bills did lose Tre'Davious White, though, for the season, which is a big deal. It's part of the reason their defense was looking so good these last 3 weeks. They finally got an elite cornerback back in the lineup, that is, cornerback, and they both those safeties, Micah Hyde also, and DeMar Hamlin, looking healthy. But yeah, we'll see how good their defense is down the line. Dolphins, you still just got to base it on the matchup and the personnel. Try to think about it from that line is, do they have what the Patriots and Bills were able to introduce in terms of personnel to slow this team down? And McDaniel's going to have counters because he is a really good offensive coach.
Yep. Yeah. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the Dolphins not being for real just because the Bills did put together a really good game plan with the best possible personnel for that game plan that the Dolphins have seen so far, without question. The Pats, despite what they might have tried to do, they don't have the personnel, which they showed today when they lost 38-3 to the Dallas Cowboys, which was never a game. It was 21-3. Halftime 17-0 in the second half there for the Cowboys. Mac Jones wants a fadeable quarterback. Against the best defensive unit in pass defense in the league, no questions. Like, you can say how good that the San Francisco 49ers defense is. I still think it's one step below the Cowboys when it comes to specifically defending the pass. Defending the run is another thing, but when you're already up, 21-3 before the blink of an eye, or 18-3 before the blink of an eye, and then 21-3 at the half, there's no game plan that the Pats could run with the people that they have on their offensive unit that would be able to bring them back. So I'm buying that the Cowboys are still good. The Cardinals might not be as bad as we think. Regardless, that was another fluky situation. It's an any given Sunday type of league in the right moments. I'm not selling on the Cowboys at all. I'm continuing to believe in them as a top 3 team in the NFC. And I'm going to continue to bet on them in the right situation, especially at home like this, where Dak is way better. And for as far as the Pats go, like, any thought that they were, I hit them under 7.5 to win before the season. I haven't been betting on them since, and I don't continue to plan on betting on them without like a really, really good valuable line.
Toughest schedule in the NFL for the Patriots. And when you think about it, even from a spot perspective, they go to Dallas after Dallas just lays an egg looking ahead to this game. And just comes out like with their hair on fire. Like, they look like the best pass defense in the league this week. Last week, not, it's because, they were ready to bounce back completely. But we do have a really juicy one, Dallas at San Francisco next Sunday night. Be interesting to watch the line on that one.
Over under 9 replays during the game of Terrell Owens standing on the star and getting tackled when he was on the Cowboys.
Yeah, I'll be watching Christian McCaffrey. I am a little disappointed that he went off so much this week against Arizona. Not that Dallas isn't aware of what he can do, but I think now he'll be like bracketed, triple teamed on every route, and so it's really going to be up on Purdy to make them pay with other guys, I think.
Yeah. Death taxes and Christian McCaffrey in the end zone. Very last thing I just want to ask you about, what's your final thoughts on the Eagles game where they had to win in overtime against the division rival Commanders? Because what I do with it is I buy that the Commanders are bad. That was the takeaway for the jump. They're still bad. The Eagles, it was just a bad game for them. It was a trap game at home where they haven't played well against these Commanders, lost to them at home last season. They just let them come in and they're take them unawares, essentially. And they just were lackadaisical outside of A.J. Brown making a bunch of big receptions. This offense looked like it didn't care, really. It should have been completely fine, like much better running the ball all day. It's just going to be a situational scenario for them. And they still came back and won a game that they easily could have lost by 3 to help me on my teases with them. But they obviously didn't cover the 8.5. And that's fine. Like, you don't pick them to cover in situations where they're just massive home favorites, in a situation where the team coming in has a lot to play for, coming off a loss and really believing that they can hang with their in-division rival, despite the fact that Ron Rivera is not a good football coach. So I'm buying both these teams showing us what they've been for most of the season. The Eagles are still the best roster probably in the league, and the Commanders still just don't have what it takes in key areas like offensive line to necessarily be able to hang with teams that are better than them.
Well, the Eagles have lost like 4 or 5 defensive starters, like also key defensive guys all over the place. So, that's what I take away is Sam Howell suddenly having the best game of his career. Like, this Eagles secondary and linebacker core is banged up. And it's just Jalen Hurts, his timing's off, his accuracy is off. Without his OC, now a new OC in there, no Shane Steichen. It just looks a little rocky. They do get the Rams and Jets here, but then 3 of their next 4, Dolphins, Cowboys, Chiefs. So if you are trying to fade the Eagles by taking Cowboys to win that division, something along those lines, you want to do it before that stretch.
Yep, that's 100% right. Yeah, I would agree. There's points in the season that you can look at where the Eagles have like 3 or 4 games in a row that are super winnable and much easier for them. And then all of a sudden they got like Cowboys, Niners, Chiefs all up in there. Got some other nastiness as well. So yeah, I agree. I think there's plenty there. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that if you're listening to this, that I write down exactly who we're buying and selling as we move forward. And Nate and I will probably continue to bring some of that to you here. At least I will, even if Nate's unavailable, because I'll be talking to him about all this stuff and collaborating anyway. So, Beefy, appreciate the time coming on again, my man.
You got it.
All right, cool. Well, that's all the time we have for you guys in this one. Going to continue to bring you these Sunday night ones. I really like getting the post-NFL action out to you guys so you can have it, especially Monday morning when you're driving to work and all that. So, until I do talk to you next, happy betting.